Living paycheck to paycheck is a difficult life. Trust me, I know, I'm doing it myself too. While it feels like you're stuck, and we kinda are, there are ways to slowly break out. I do not have any secret ways to get a promotion or a raise, but half the battle is how and what you spend your money on, not just how much money you make. The key is budgeting. Tracking your spend through a budget system is an extremely important lesson that people need to do if you ever want to dig yourself out of the hole life. While I know it isn't the most fancy thing, budgeting can be a real game changer on your mission to financial freedom if you're intentional with where you put your money. There are a lot of different ways to look at budgeting, and everyone is in a different situation that needs to adjust their strategy depending on their specific circumstances. But a great starting point, if you have no experience budgeting in the past, is to break up your total income by setting aside 50% of your income into needs, 30% into wants, and 20% into savings. Let's start by looking at each of these categories individually and what characterizes as a need versus a want and examples of savings accounts. Once we understand the three, we can put it all together to see its feasibility in the real world. Starting with the largest allocation of your income, 50% of your income should be spent on your needs. Your needs include all of your expenses that you need to pay for your personal survival. This includes your living expense, car expense, groceries, healthcare, etc. It is absolutely essential that you live within your means and choose a mortgage or rent payment that can keep you within this threshold. Calling out your home expense is key, considering it is likely the largest driver of your needs category. Another thing, please for goodness sake, you do not need that fancy car to show the world that you're cool. Find a reliable car that gets you from point A to point B. The key takeaway for the needs category is that not all needs are created equal. Try to live within your means. Now let's look at the next category, wants. For your wants, you should look to budget 30% of your total income. This includes things like new clothing, accessories like a watch or jewelry, travel, eating out, or any other hobby that requires money. Wants are the things you could live without, but are necessary to live fulfilling and happy lives. You need to be strict on deciding whether certain purchases are a need or a want. For example, the average coffee drinker spends over roughly $2,130 per year. That's over $175 per month. It is important to not allow yourself to blur the lines between a need versus a want. The rest of your income can then be allocated to your savings at 20%. Savings can mean a few different things depending on where you're at in life. For someone in their 20s, you may want to put your 20% savings into more aggressive growth areas like your 401k, Roth IRA, or the stock market. You may be living with your parents still and do not necessarily need to worry about building an emergency fund in case you get laid off. On the flip side, if you're in your 40s and have mouths to feed, this story changes. You may look to focus more on an emergency fund to cover a few months of living expenses in case something goes south at work. The leftover income can be invested in similar high-growth areas to prepare for retirement. In any case, this 20% savings allocation should be focused on letting your money grow. Setting automatic monthly investments that are within your means because of this budgeting strategy allows for a set-it-and-forget-it mentality that will allow you to comfortably plan for retirement. It is important to not shoot ourselves in the foot. We only have so much control over how much we make, but we do have almost full control over our spending decisions that have lasting impacts on whether we retire at age 60 or age 75. By monitoring how much you're spending and on what, you gain a clearer picture of your financial habits. Knowing where your money is going is the first step towards successful budgeting. On the flip side, we've also talked about the importance of saving and investing. Ideally, 20% of your income should go towards savings, particularly retirement savings. Unfortunately, this is an area many people neglect. In fact, about 50% of individuals aged 35 and younger have no retirement savings at all, and 40% of adults across the US are in the same position. You don't want to be part of that statistic, working at 65 and wishing you had started earlier. Prioritizing your retirement savings now sets you up for freedom and security in the future. So let's paint the picture with a potential real-life scenario. Let's say you make $4,000 a month after tax. We want to budget this $4,000 by setting aside 50% of it for needs, 30% for wants, and 20% for savings. This would be $2,000 for your needs, $1,200 for your wants, and $800 for your savings. Starting with your $2,000 for needs, let's say you live alone in a modest one-bedroom apartment that costs $1,200 a month. You have around $350 a month for utilities for things like your electric, water, internet, and phone bills. That leaves you $400 a month for groceries, $250 a month for transportation costs, and the final $200 for managing your debt, like any outstanding student loans. For the wants category, the $1,200 can be broken out in very different ways depending on the individual's interests. For this example, let's say you spend $400 on personal hobbies, $400 for eating out, and $400 for hanging out with friends. And for the savings category, you have your final $800 per month to invest and save. You may invest $500 a month on your 401k, $200 a month in a high-yield savings account, and $100 into your personal brokerage account.